She is running an illegal daycare out of that house, my mother said into the microphone, and 36 people in the church fellowship hall turned toward me at once. 3 days later, Hamilton County Code Enforcement was at my front door. My lender froze $84,615 from my renovation draw, and the downstairs tenant I had lined up walked away because no one wants to sign a lease on a property under investigation. My parents did not just humiliate me at my grandmother's memorial. They used the county, my bank, and my neighborhood against me with a false report they knew could wreck me. Then a woman I had never met set a manila folder on a buffet table after the service meal, read one sentence out loud about attached interior photos, and my mother's church friend's smile disappeared. My name is Taylor Ann Whitaker. I'm 24 years old. Now, let me take you back to Fort Thomas, Kentucky, on Saturday, April 6th, 2024. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. My grandmother, Jean Whitaker, died on March 29th, 2024, at St. Elizabeth, Fort Thomas, after a short, ugly stretch of pneumonia that turned bad faster than anyone expected. The memorial service was 1 week later at New Hope Baptist on Highland Avenue. The fellowship hall smelled like lemon furniture polish, coffee that had been sitting on a hot plate too long, and those buttermints older churchwomen always put in glass bowls like it is still 1998. My grandmother had been the only person in my family who treated me like I was not a problem to solve. She left me enough money to buy a small duplex on South Fort Thomas Avenue the year before. Not a mansion, not some fantasy house, a brick duplex built in 1948 with creaky stairs, a laundry room that smelled faintly like iron pipes after rain, and a downstairs unit I was fixing up to rent so I would not have to choose between groceries and property taxes every month. By April, I had put almost everything into that place. I had purchased it for $219,000 in August of 2023. I used $130,000 from Grandma Jean's estate distribution as my down payment and reserved another $84,615 in a renovation line attached to the property. That number mattered. It mattered because I knew it by heart. Cabinets, rewiring, subfloor repair, 2 bathroom rebuilds, lead safe paint remediation, permits, furnace replacement, windows for the back unit. My whole next 3 years sat in that number. My parents knew all of this. My mother, Denise Whitaker, knew because she asked for a full tour on Sunday, March 31st, 6 days before the memorial. She wore a cream cardigan that smelled like Chanel No. 5 and stale cigarette smoke, even though she never smoked in front of church people. She walked from room to room looking at my stacked tile boxes, my contractor invoices clipped on a clipboard in the kitchen, and the temporary mini fridge in the living room. She stopped in the downstairs unit and said very calmly, "I still do not understand why you insist on making life difficult. A young woman alone should rent an apartment and keep her life manageable." I said, "I am managing it." She gave me a thin smile and touched the nursery green paint sample I had taped to the wall for the upstairs guest room. "This is a great deal of house for one person." That line stayed with me for reasons I did not understand until later. My father, Robert Whitaker, came in behind her carrying a tray of deli sandwiches I had not asked for. He stood in the kitchen doorway with his truck keys clipped to his belt and looked around like he was surveying storm damage. "People talk when they see children in and out," he said. I remember stopping with a tape measure in my hand. "What children? Your cousin Erin's twins were here last weekend, were they not? They were here for half an hour while she dropped off the memorial photo boards. You were there." He shrugged. People do not care about facts once they have an impression. That was one of my father's gifts. He liked saying threatening things in the rhythm of advice. At the memorial, after the pastor spoke and after my cousin Laurel cried through a hymn, "No one should sing without warning," there was the part where family members were invited to share a memory. I was sitting at the round table near the wall, under the old thermostat, next to the framed display of Grandma in a blue windbreaker holding a fish she looked unimpressed by. I could hear the folding chair leg beside me scraping the tile because my cousin kept bouncing her knee. My mother stood up with that exact controlled posture she uses when she wants to look generous. Back straight, one hand around the microphone. Face softened just enough for an audience. She spoke about duty and sacrifice and how my grandmother believed in family accountability. Then she looked directly at me and said, "Jean would be heartbroken to know that some people in this family are using inherited money to run an illegal daycare out of a residential neighborhood." There are children going in and out of that house all day. It is not safe. It is not honest. It is not what she worked for. 36 people in the room. I counted later because I needed to know exactly how many heard it. The room went quiet in that fast, ugly way rooms do when people realize something indecent is happening and decide to stay seated for it. I could hear a spoon hit a plate near the desserts. I could hear the refrigerator motor in the church kitchen click on. I could feel heat in my chest, not the crying kind, the counting kind. I did not stand up. I did not cry. I did not ask what the hell she was talking about. Instead, I reached for my phone under the table, opened the voice memo app, and hit record. That is how I have survived my family for years. Not the trusting kind of daughter, the timestamp kind. Pastor Miles cleared his throat and said, "Let us stay with Jean's memory today." My mother handed the microphone back like she had done something noble. My father never looked at me. He adjusted his cuff and kept his eyes on the sheet cake. After the service meal, 3 women from church stopped by my table separately to ask, with fake softness, whether I was licensed for all that. One neighbor from my block, Mrs. Carla Norris, said, "I had no idea there were that many little ones over there." I said, "There are no little ones over there." She blinked. Oh, that was the thing. The lie had not even settled before it started traveling. When I got home that afternoon, there were still contractor tarps rolled along the downstairs wall, and the whole house smelled like cut wood and latex paint. I stood in my kitchen and listened to the old refrigerator hum while I replayed the recording from the memorial 3 times. My mother's voice was clean on it, not muffled, not confused, clear enough to write out word for word. At 7:14 that evening, my phone lit up with a text from my cousin Erin Cook. Erin was the kind of person who knew everything 3 rooms before anyone else but treated silence like loyalty. Her message said, "I need to tell you something, but not by text. Can I call?" She called at 7:19. I was sitting on the floor beside a stack of cabinet pulls because I had not had it in me to unpack them. Erin said, "Taylor, before I say this, I need you to know I did not think she would actually do it." I said nothing. She inhaled. I could hear her dishwasher running in the background. "Aunt Denise asked me on Monday how often my boys were at your place. She said the neighborhood had concerns and she wanted to calm people down. I told her the truth, which is twice, maybe 30 or 40 minutes because you were helping me with the memorial boards and because I picked up paint swatches from you. Then your dad asked whether you had toys set up in the basement. I told him no. He said good, because this will be easier if there is nothing for them to photograph." I stood up. "What did you just say?" Erin got quiet for 2 seconds. "I should have called you then, yes," I said. "You should have." She started crying. Not hard, just enough to make the conversation about her if I let it. I did not. I thanked her for telling me and hung up. If you have ever had that moment where you know everything is about to change, you know it is not dramatic when it happens. It is administrative, a sentence, a phrase, the part of your brain that starts labeling evidence before your body catches up. Stay with me, because the first paper trail showed up less than 72 hours later. On Tuesday, April 9th at 9:23 in the morning, I was kneeling in the downstairs bathroom trying to line up a vanity drawer front when somebody knocked on my storm door 3 times in a row. Sharp, official, not neighborly. I looked through the glass and saw 2 people in county jackets standing on my front steps. One woman, one man, clipboards. A white county sedan parked against the curb. My stomach dropped so hard I actually had to put my hand on the wall. The woman introduced herself as Laura Beck from Hamilton County Planning and Development. The man was Darren Phelps, who mostly stayed behind her and looked like he would rather be at a dentist. She said, "We received a complaint alleging that an unlicensed daycare is being operated at this address. We need to inspect the property." I said, "There is no daycare here." She gave me a tired little nod. "Then this should be quick. Should, not was." They walked the house upstairs, downstairs, the backyard, the detached garage. Laura Beck had the kind of practical perfume that smelled like soap and wintergreen gum. Darren's boots left dust on my entry rug. They checked for cribs, posted schedules, child fencing, sign-in sheets, sleeping mats, food prep for children, bathroom step stools, art stations, emergency contact charts. I know that list because I wrote it down after they left. There was nothing to find because there was nothing there. A box of subway tile, open paint cans, contractor plastic, a sofa I bought off Facebook Marketplace from a couple in Alexandria for $150. That was the downstairs child area, apparently. Still, an investigation had to stay open while they processed the complaint. Laura explained that very carefully, like she was trying to protect me from her own department. Even if this is unfounded, lenders and insurers sometimes react once an active investigation exists in the system. At 10:38, after they drove away, I called my construction lender, Commonwealth Community Bank. I spoke to a man named Stephen Hale in draw management who sounded embarrassed before I even finished saying my name. He told me my fourth disbursement, scheduled for Thursday, had been placed on hold because compliance had flagged reported business use inconsistent with residential renovation financing. Plain language. My money was frozen because someone said I was running a business. The loan was not written for. The hold amount was $84,615. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the grain in the wood while he talked. The table still had one ring mark from Grandma Jean's coffee mug from before she died, because it had been hers before it was mine. Stephen kept saying this was temporary, just a pause, just until the county cleared things up. Temporary means something different when your electrician wants payment by Friday and your flooring installer has a 6-week lead time. By 2:10 that afternoon, my downstairs prospective tenant, a traveling ultrasound tech named Melissa Ward, emailed to say she was withdrawing. Her employer required stable housing documentation by April 15th, and she could not sign under a property complaint. Her lease would have brought in $1,875 a month starting May 1st for a 12-month term. With her deposit and pet fee, that deal was worth $23,440 to me over the year. It was not just hurt feelings, it was a measurable collapse. I opened a folder on my laptop and named it April 9th. Then I made subfolders: complaint, lender, tenant, witnesses, photos, family. I took screenshots, I exported the memorial recording. I emailed myself a transcript of my mother's quote with the time listed. I wrote down what Aaron had said and the exact minute of the call from my call log: 7:19 p.m., Sunday, April 6th. I was not even thinking strategically yet. I was building a raft that night. I called the only person in my life who knew how my brain works when I get very calm. Her name was Maya Singh. She had been my roommate for 1 year at Northern Kentucky University before she transferred. She was in her second year, as a law clerk in Cincinnati and the least theatrical person I know. I told her everything while sitting on the floor of my unfinished downstairs kitchen, because the cabinets had not gone in and the acoustics made every word sound harsh. She did not gasp. She did not tell me to breathe. She said, "Start with what can be independently verified." I have the church recording. Good, but that only shows she repeated it publicly. It does not prove she made the report. I know. You need who filed it, when, how, and what they used to support it. I'm guessing my parents. Guess later. Pull records first. I leaned my head against the wall. It smelled like fresh paint and joint compound. My loan draw is frozen. I heard that in your voice. That line nearly broke me. Not because it was kind, because it was exact. Maya told me to ask the county for the complaint packet, not with a dramatic demand and not with legal language. Just ask for a copy of the report and any attachments used in the inspection. She told me to request everything by email and save the headers. She told me to stop talking to family by phone unless I was willing to record or immediately summarize the call to myself in writing. Then she said, "Taylor, do not confront them yet. People who weaponize institutions count on emotional reaction. Make them commit to paper." I slept maybe 2 hours. On Wednesday, April 10th at 8:04 in the morning, I emailed Hamilton County Planning and Development asking for the full complaint record tied to my address. At 11:51, Laura Beck replied that she could release the inspection summary right away and the complaint packet after the case was formally logged for public records. She added one line that mattered more than she knew. Some attached materials may be redacted if they contain identifiable information. Attached materials. At 3:20 that afternoon, my father called. His voice had that careful church deacon tone. "Your mother was trying to protect the neighborhood." I was standing in Lowe's holding a sample board of vinyl plank flooring when he said it. The store smelled like rubber mats and sawdust. A forklift beeped somewhere behind me. I said, "Protect it from what?" "From misunderstanding. You have had children there frequently." "No, I have not. It does not help you to be argumentative." That sentence. That old sentence. I looked at the display labels until the words went blurry. Then he said, if you simply cooperate and explain what happened, these agencies are usually very forgiving. Agencies, plural. I wrote that down as soon as the call ended. I did not tell him about the loan hold. I did not tell him Melissa had backed out. I did not ask how he knew a complaint existed before I had told anyone in the family. Instead, I said, thank you for the call. Then I hung up and typed the conversation into my notes app in the parking lot at 3:28 p.m. that evening. I drove by my parents' house on South Grand Avenue. Their living room curtains were open. I saw my mother's silhouette moving from the kitchen to the dining room with her phone in one hand. I did not knock. I parked on the next street, opened our family text thread, and started scrolling backward. There it was. Sunday, March 31st, at 4:52 p.m. after touring my duplex, my mother had texted me, "Could you send me those 2 kitchen photos?" Carol asked how your remodel was coming along. I had sent them at 4:56 without thinking. One wide shot of the downstairs kitchen with exposed shelving. One closer, one showing the temporary folding table, my invoice clipboard, and the back door. She had my interior photos because I had handed them to her. That is what betrayal feels like when you finally see the mechanism, not the knife kind, the borrowed key kind. If you have ever replayed your own politeness and realized it became the weapon, you know that specific nausea. You start cataloging every ordinary thing you gave in good faith. The next person who moved this forward did not mean to save me, but she did. On Friday, April 12th at 1:17 in the afternoon, Laura Beck emailed me the inspection summary. The complaint had been called in on Monday, April 1st at 8:14 a.m. The caller alleged I was caring for 6 to 8 children daily, charging cash, parking cars along the alley, and leaving children unsupervised in the rear yard. The complaint also alleged there were cribs visible in the lower unit and small children arriving before 7 a.m. That was already enough to make me feel sick because it was detailed in a very specific way. Too specific to be neighborhood gossip. Too specific not to come from someone who had walked through the house and knew there was a lower unit. I had not even posted the downstairs renovation publicly yet. Then Laura released the complaint packet at 4:32 p.m. I printed it at the FedEx office in Newport because I did not trust myself to read something that important only on a screen. The print shop smelled like toner, cardboard, and overheated plastic. My hands were shaking so badly when I typed the print code that I had to do it twice. The packet was 18 pages. First page was the typed complaint summary. Second page was a call log, then 6 printed photos, interior photos, my downstairs kitchen, my back steps, the side yard gate, the unfinished lower living room. One image showed 2 small sippy cups on the windowsill. Another showed a folded blanket on the sofa. The complaint notation under the photo said, "Visual support provided by reporting party." My mother had come over after church on March 31st, asked for photos, and then used those plus whatever else she took herself to help make the house look like a daycare. The 2 sippy cups had belonged to Aaron's twins the previous weekend. I had not even noticed them on the sill. I took the packet to Maya's apartment in Mount Lookout that night. She had Thai takeout on the table and a legal pad open before I arrived. Her apartment smelled like ginger, printer paper, and the sandalwood candle she always forgot to blow out before guests came over. We spread everything across her dining table. Maya read in silence for 10 minutes, one finger tapping the side of her water glass. Then she said, "Who besides your parents knew enough to describe the lower unit and the backyard that way? Aaron, maybe. My contractor, my loan officer, my neighbor across the alley." But the memorial line came from my mother. Maya nodded. "And the photos," I said, "could they have used mine?" 2 look like your texted images, 4 do not. See the angle? Someone was standing in the room? I sat down hard enough to rattle the silverware drawer beside me. Maya turned the pages and stopped at the call log. The report came in through the general county line. Complaint taken by intake clerk Rhonda Ellis. It says the caller identified herself as a nearby family member with direct knowledge. Can they tell me the name? Maybe not by email. But the intake clerk can still exist as a witness, and these attachments matter. If you can tie those images back to your mother's phone or your text thread, you have a very ugly story for whoever froze your loan. At 9:12, while we were still sorting pages, my cousin Erin texted. "There is more, I found something." She came over at 9:50 wearing gray sweatpants and gilt. She smelled like baby shampoo and rain. It had started misting outside. She sat on the very edge of Maya's couch like she did not deserve the cushion. Then she said on Monday morning, Aunt Denise came by my place around 7:45 to drop off 2 casserole dishes from the memorial prep. She asked if she could borrow one of the boys' cups because she forgot to bring hers in from the car and did not want coffee spilling in her SUV. She took one blue sippy cup and one snack container with animal crackers because she said Uncle Rob was hungry. I just stared at her. Erin looked at the complaint photos on Maya's table and covered her mouth. Oh my God, Taylor, Maya asked. Can you write out exactly what you just said with date and time while it is fresh? Erin nodded immediately. There are people who stay silent because they are afraid. There are people who stay silent because being useful to the strongest person in the room has become their whole identity. Erin had been the second kind for years, watching her realize the cost of that was not satisfying. It was just late. She wrote out a signed statement at Maya's table on college-ruled notebook paper. Name, date, time, full account. She included that my mother asked weirdly specific questions about whether toddlers use blankets for naps and whether my downstairs sofa was near a wall. Erin remembered because she had joked, Denise, what are you doing, staging a preschool? At the time, my mother smiled and said, I am trying to understand what these operations look like. There was silence after that. The refrigerator hummed. Rain tapped Maya's windows. I said, I need more than family statements. Maya said, You do. But this just told us what to go get. The next week became a part-time job built out of humiliation. On Monday, April 15th, I asked my exterior camera provider to export footage from Sunday, March 31st, between 1 p.m. and 5 p.m. at 2:23 p.m. My mother entered my backyard alone while I was upstairs taking a contractor call. I did not know that at the time because I had trusted her inside my house. The camera over the back steps showed her standing by the side gate for 1 minute and 11 seconds with her phone angled toward the lower windows. At 2:25, she re-entered through the back door holding something blue. At 2:26, she came back outside and set the blue object on my downstairs windowsill through the open lower sash. She looked around first, then she stepped back and took a photo. I watched that clip 12 times. I did not scream. I did not throw anything. I emailed the clip to myself, saved it to 2 drives, and printed the still frames at Staples on Alexandria Pike. On Tuesday, April 16th, I went to Commonwealth Community Bank in person and asked to speak to whoever could explain exactly what document had caused the hold. The branch smelled like carpet cleaner and old pens. A compliance manager named Andrea Flores met me in a glass office with fake succulents on the shelf. She told me they had received an internal note after a county flag appeared during their draw review. She could not release internal comments, but she could tell me the hold related to reported active childcare use inconsistent with stated occupancy. I set the inspection summary and my photo timeline on the desk. Andrea looked at each page slowly, professionally. When she reached the still frame of my mother placing the sippy cup on the windowsill, she inhaled through her nose and said, Can you leave copies of this with me? Yes, I cannot promise a timeline, but I can send this upstairs today. That phrase, send this upstairs, gave me more hope than anything else that week. On Wednesday, April 17th, I met with my contractor, Luis Mendoza, at the duplex. Luis owned Mendoza Home Repair out of Covington. He had been in every room of my house for months and had exactly the patience for nonsense that comes from raising 4 daughters. He smelled like coffee and drywall. I told him what happened. He took off his cap, rubbed his forehead, and said, Your mother asked me on March 30th if I was installing child-proofing features for the little program downstairs. I thought she was confused. Did you say that to anyone else? No, but I can write it down now. So he did. Dated statement, exact wording. He included that I had no child fixtures installed and that the lower unit was not habitable the week the complaint was filed because the bathroom vanity, kitchen sink, and 2 grounded outlets were still incomplete. No one could legally operate anything there. By Thursday, April 18th, I had a folder 1.5 inches thick. Not because I was brave, because they left me no other shape. I also had resistance. My Aunt Shelley called to say I was making your mother sound criminal when she was acting out of concern. A deacon from church named Harold Voss left me a voicemail suggesting I resolve this privately before it damages testimony in the congregation. My father's sister told me Grandma Jean would hate all this paperwork. I listened to each one once. Then I saved them. I stopped answering unknown numbers. On Saturday, April 20th, at 11 in the morning, there was a post-memorial lunch at my parents' house for out-of-town relatives who had not stayed long enough after the service the week before. Not a formal event, just one of those family extension days my mother used to stage because she liked controlling the afterimage of things. Pulled chicken in crock pots, deviled eggs, paper plates with silver borders, iced tea in a glass dispenser no one was allowed to touch except her. I had not planned on going. Then Laura Beck called me Friday afternoon at 4:57. She said, "Miss Whitaker, I thought you should know your case is moving toward closure as unfounded. Also, because you asked specifically whether the reporting party submitted original images, I checked the metadata fields that came through our email intake. 4 of the attached interior photos appear to have been created on March 31st between 2006 and 2009 p.m. from a device identified as D. Whitaker's iPhone. I do not know if that helps you. I should probably not even be saying it this plainly." I sat on my front steps in the warm smell of cut grass and just closed my eyes. D. Whitaker, not a guess, not a family theory, a county employee saying the thing out loud because she had seen enough women walk into offices with this exact stunned face. I said it helps. She lowered her voice. "The complaint packet itself will speak for us. I only wanted you to understand that your instincts were not wrong." That is a sentence I will remember for the rest of my life. If you have ever needed one outside person to say, quietly, that you are not crazy, then you know what that can do to your spine. It straightens it. And if you're still here with me, please subscribe. Stories like this matter because the details matter. What happened at my parents' house the next day would have sounded impossible if I had not brought every page. I arrived at my parents' house on South Grand Avenue on Saturday, April 20th, at 12:20 p.m. The dogwood tree in their front yard was dropping white petals onto the walk. Somebody had opened the back windows and I could smell barbecue sauce, furniture polish, and my mother's cinnamon candles fighting each other in the air. There were 14 people there. I counted them the same way I had counted at the church hall. My Aunt Shelley in a denim jacket, Cousin Laurel and her husband Drew, Aaron with the twins in matching navy sneakers, Pastor Miles because my mother liked keeping a witness nearby if she thought it made her look innocent, 2 older women from church I only knew as Brenda and Gail, my father at the dining room carving station in his Saturday polo like a man who had done nothing all month. When I walked in, conversation thinned, not stopped, thinned. My mother crossed the room with a serving spoon still in her hand and said, "Taylor, I am so glad you came. I think we all need a calmer tone." That was her opening move. Pretend the problem was the weather I was bringing in. I said, "I brought some paperwork." She smiled without moving her eyes. "This is not the place." I set my accordion folder on the sideboard beneath the framed family beach photo from Hilton Head. "Actually, this is exactly the place because this is where people have been repeating it." My father said, "Do not make a scene." I looked at him. "You made one at Grandma's memorial." The room went quiet. Real quiet this time. You could hear the ice settling in the tea dispenser. I did not launch into a speech. I did not call my mother a liar. Instead, I took out 3 sets of copies and laid them on the dining table beside the relish tray. One stack was the memorial transcript with the quote highlighted. One stack was the county complaint packet with the photo pages clipped on top. One stack was the still frames from my back camera, each timestamp enlarged in yellow on the page. My mother did not touch them. She said, "I do not know what you think these are." Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. My Aunt Shelley actually jumped. My father went to get it, and from the hallway I heard a woman's voice say, "I am looking for Taylor Whitaker, Laura Beck from Hamilton County." That was the moment the room changed. Not because of what she had come to do, because of what she was, outside the family, impossible to dismiss as dramatic, uninterested in our feelings. She stepped into the foyer wearing the same county jacket, holding a large manila envelope. Her hair was twisted up with a pencil stuck through it, and she looked mildly annoyed to be interrupting lunch. Behind her stood Melissa Ward, my former prospective tenant, who had texted me 20 minutes earlier to say she could stop by if I still wanted her written withdrawal statement delivered in person. I had said yes, I did not know Laura would come herself. The room smelled suddenly hotter, like baked ham glaze and panic. Laura looked at me first. Miss Whitaker, I had an unfounded case closure for your signature and a corrected notice for your lender. Since I was already nearby on another stop, I thought hand delivery would be quicker. My mother said, "This is a family meal." Laura turned, not rude, just factual. I am with the county. That shut my mother up faster than anything I have ever seen. I took the envelope from Laura and said, "Would you mind explaining one thing out loud since everyone here has been so concerned?" She hesitated for maybe half a second. Then she said, "I can explain the status of the complaint. Please." She set the envelope on the sideboard, opened her clipboard, and read in the same voice people use to confirm package contents. The reported illegal daycare at South Fort Thomas Avenue was found to be unfounded. Inspection found no evidence of childcare operation. Attached support materials submitted by the reporting party included interior photographs created on March 31, 2024, between 2:26 p.m. and 2:29 p.m. from a device labeled D. Whitaker's iPhone. No performance, no accusation, just a sentence. My mother went still in a way that looked almost elegant if you did not know her. Her left hand tightened around the serving spoon. My father looked at the table instead of at anyone's face. Pastor Miles said very softly, "Denise." No one else spoke. Melissa stepped forward then, holding a one-page letter. "I also need to hand Taylor my written withdrawal statement for the bank file." She glanced around, realizing too late that she had walked into the middle of something. "I'm sorry, I did not know everyone would be here," I said. "You're fine." Melissa read one sentence from the letter because she thought she was helping by being precise. "I rescinded my lease on April 9th solely because the property was under investigation for an alleged unlicensed daycare, which made the unit ineligible under my employer's housing requirement." Again, not dramatic. Worse, specific. My mother finally spoke. Just one broken sentence. "That device name does not mean," then nothing. She did not finish it. She did not have a version of events big enough for the room anymore. Erin started crying first. Not loudly. My Aunt Shelley sat down at the breakfast nook without meaning to. One of the churchwomen, Brenda maybe, put her hand over her chest like she had been physically struck. My father said, "Laura, I think there has been some misunderstanding." It sounded weak even to him. Laura replied, "Sir, I am not here to discuss family misunderstanding. I am here to close a false complaint." False complaint. There are rooms where that phrase would have triggered a storm. In my parents' dining room, it did something better. It removed oxygen. I handed Laura the signature she needed. Then I asked, "Can you also say whether a lender notice was sent?" She looked at the second page. "A corrected notice will go to Commonwealth Community Bank today stating the complaint was unfounded and should not affect occupancy or draw processing." Andrea Flores from the bank had told me by phone that morning that if the county sent that correction, my draw could be released Monday or Tuesday. Melissa's lease was gone already, but the hold could end. Pastor Miles picked up one of the camera stills from the table. "Denise, is this your cardigan?" Everyone looked down at the image: cream knit sleeve, gold watch, blue sippy cup in my lower window, timestamp 2:26 p.m. My mother set the serving spoon on the sideboard very carefully so it would not clang. Then she said, "I was trying to get her attention before this house ruined her. She is in over her head." It was almost impressive how close she stayed to self-righteousness with the floor gone under her. I said, "You tried to wreck my financing." She looked at me then, really looked. "You were never supposed to carry property like this alone." There it was. Not worry, not safety. Punishment for leaving the economic shape they preferred me in. My father tried a different angle. "No money has actually been lost if the bank corrects this." Melissa, who barely knew us, said, "I backed out. So yes, money was lost. Bless that woman forever." I opened my folder again and took out one last packet. A typed summary Maya had helped me draft. Timeline of dates, frozen draw amount, lost lease value, contractor delay fees already invoiced, temporary storage extension on materials because install dates had slipped. Total documented financial damage as of April 20th, including direct loss rental contract and delay expenses, was $84,615, same number as the frozen draw because the delay cascade had been built around that disbursement. I said it in front of my father. I want repayment, I said. Not a discussion, not family mediation, repayment. My Aunt Shelley actually whispered, Taylor. I did not raise my voice. You used a false county complaint to block my money and cost me a signed tenant. I have the recording from the memorial. I have the county packet. I have the camera footage. I have Aaron's statement, Luis Mendoza's statement, Melissa's withdrawal letter, and the lender hold notice. I also have copies with Andrea Flores at Commonwealth, so you can call this concern if that helps you sleep. Everybody else in this room can read what it actually was. The silence after that lasted maybe 9 seconds. I counted. Pastor Miles was the one who moved first. He put his plate down untouched and said, Robert, Denise, I think I should leave, and I think you need to step away from service at church until this is handled. There was your first price. My mother's mouth parted slightly. Church was not casual for her. She ran funeral meals, coordinated holiday outreach, controlled sign-up sheets, knew every family with children by name because that gave her a way into every room. Pastor, that is not necessary, he said. It is small word heavy landing. Brenda and Gail left 5 minutes later without dessert. Aunt Shelley would not meet my mother's eyes. Aaron came over and stood beside me, not touching me, just standing there publicly for once. That mattered more than a hug would have. Laura Beck left after giving me 2 signed copies of the closure. At the door, she paused and said quietly, Get that to your bank before 5 if you can. I will. I drove straight from my parents' house to the Fort Thomas branch, arriving at 4:13 p.m. Andrea Flores took the packet, reviewed the closure notice, saw the county language and Melissa's statement, and said, This should be enough to release the hold Monday morning. I am also noting file misconduct by a third-party complaint. I asked, Can you put that in writing? She smiled just a little. I can send a confirmation email within the hour. At 4:56 she did. I saved it to 3 places that night. My father called twice. I did not answer. My mother left one voicemail at 7:21 p.m. You have made this uglier than it needed to be. I saved that too. On Monday, April 22nd at 9:34 a.m., Commonwealth Community Bank emailed that my draw hold had been lifted. $84,615 released for processing. I cried exactly once that week, and it was in my car outside a plumbing supply store while smelling PVC glue and spring rain through the cracked window. Not because I was overwhelmed, because I had been keeping that folder for 11 days. Winning quietly does not mean winning quickly. The draw release fixed the immediate bleeding. It did not fix the lost tenant. Melissa had already taken a furnished place in Blue Ash because her contract start date could not move. My flooring install got bumped by 19 days. I paid $1,390 in storage and rescheduling fees because materials were sitting at the supplier waiting on a green light. I spent evenings on Facebook Marketplace and Furnished Finder, trying to replace a tenant in the narrow window before summer. My parents tried to do what people like them always do after proof lands. They switched from attack to revision. On Tuesday, April 23rd, my father emailed a 2-paragraph note saying there had been miscommunication with the county and offering to help where practical with my project if I would agree not to spread this further in professional channels. Professional channels was such a funny phrase for a man who sold marine parts for 30 years and thought every serious sentence should sound like a board meeting. I forwarded it to Maya. She called within 10 minutes. That is basically an admission he knows there are channels. I said, I know. Do not negotiate verbally, so I did not. I replied by email at 11:14 a.m. The financial damage currently totals $84,615. If you would like to discuss repayment, send it in writing. At 6:02 p.m., my mother emailed from her personal account for the first time in years. Subject line, clarification. She wrote that she never intended financial harm, that concerns were shared by others, and that she would be devastated to think an attempt at caution had been misunderstood. Misunderstood. The most dishonest word in my family, I noticed she never denied the report. She never denied the photos. She never denied speaking at the memorial. She just floated above the verbs. Maya connected me with her friend Nora Gallagher, a young attorney in Cincinnati who handled business disputes and was perfectly happy to be the kind of polite that makes rich older people sweat. I met Nora on Thursday, April 25th, at a coffee shop in Hyde Park. She wore navy, took neat notes, and asked me for every document in date order. The coffee shop smelled like espresso grounds, orange peel, and wet coats because it was raining again. After 40 minutes of review, she said, "You have enough to make this expensive for them." "I do not need expensive. I need specific," she smiled. Good answer. Nora drafted a repayment demand in plain language, not theatrical, just undeniable. Attached were the county closure, complaint packet references, stills from the security footage, bank hold documentation, contractor delay fees, Melissa's written lease withdrawal, and my memorial transcript. Total demanded $84,615. Payment deadline May 15th, 2024. If unpaid, she would move forward by taking them to court for the losses tied to the false report and the bad faith damage around it. That wording mattered to me. Not because I wanted a legal fight, because for once someone else was willing to arrange the facts in a room my parents respected. My mother called me the morning after Nora's letter hit their mailbox. Friday, April 26th, 8:12 a.m. I was in line at the drive-through pharmacy picking up grout sealant wipes because my life had become very strange. She said, "You have involved outsiders in family matters?" I said, "You involved the county?" She was quiet for 1 second. "Then you do not know what carrying a difficult child does to a marriage?" I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my nails left little crescent marks in my palm. There are things mothers say that make you sad, then there are things they say that clarify the entire architecture. That sentence explained 30 years of tone in 8 words. I said, "Put anything else in writing." Then I hung up. If you have ever reached the point where the truth is no longer emotional for you, only logistical, you know how dangerous that is for the person who hurt you. Not the shouting kind, the organized kind. Two more people then did what families pray outsiders will not do. They told the truth without dressing it up. First was Pastor Miles. On Sunday, April 28th, he called to let me know the church board had asked my parents to step down from all volunteer leadership for the rest of the year. Meals ministry, benevolence coordination, youth event check-ins, all of it. Not permanent, he said, careful as always, but real. He also said multiple members had independently confirmed hearing my mother's memorial accusation, and church leadership could not ignore a false public claim made during a service-related event. My mother cared about image more than money some days. That loss hit her where she actually lived. Second was Andrea Flores at the bank. On Monday, April 29th, she emailed a final note confirming that my draw delay had been triggered by the county complaint and that the release was reinstated only after receipt of the unfounded closure. She wrote, "The delay was not caused by borrower conduct." 4 simple words. Not caused by borrower conduct. I printed that sentence and put it at the front of my folder. By May 8th, I had a new tenant candidate, a physical therapist named Julie Kemp, starting at St. Elizabeth in June. She signed for 1 year at $1,825 a month, slightly less than Melissa's deal, but solid. More importantly, she signed because the county matter had been closed. The bank hold was lifted, and I had learned to explain my situation in one neat sentence without apologizing for it. On May 15th, the repayment deadline passed. At 4:30 p.m., Nora emailed me and said, "No payment. One settlement inquiry from your father's side asking if full amount is negotiable." They used the phrase in the spirit of family resolution. I laughed out loud alone in my kitchen. The kitchen was finally finished by then. White shaker cabinets, matte black pulls under cabinet lights. It smelled like grout, coffee, and the peonies Julie had dropped off after signing because she said the unit felt safe and well run. I loved that phrase more than she knew. I told Nora the spirit of family resolution had the county at my door send the next thing she did. I will keep the court part simple, because this story is not about dramatic arguments in front of a judge. It is about paperwork doing what truth does when people stop protecting a lie. Nora handled the filings. My parents' lawyer tried to frame the report as a good faith concern. That collapsed under the photo metadata, the security footage, Aaron's signed statement, Luis's contractor statement, Andrea's bank confirmation, and Laura Beck's county record notes. My parents did not have a counterstory, they had adjectives. In July of 2024, 2 weeks before a hearing date they had clearly hoped would scare me into backing down. They agreed to settle, not because they felt remorse, because they had run out of room. The settlement amount was $84,615, paid to me in two certified transfers, 11 days apart, 42,000 on July 9th, 42,615 on July 20th. They also had to cover my documented attorney fees from the dispute. That number was separate. My father had to cash part of an investment account early to make it happen. I know because he complained about the penalty to my Aunt Shelley, who told Aaron, who told me months later in the flat tone people use when they finally understand gossip is actually evidence wearing lipstick. My mother lost her role on the church bereavement committee permanently. Pastor Miles did not restore her after the settlement. He told her, according to Shelley, that grief work requires trust. That was the line of the whole year for me. Grief work requires trust. After payment cleared, I changed my locks, installed interior cameras, and blocked my parents on everything except email. Nora had me keep that one line open so contact remained documented. Smart, clean, boring. That is how winning usually looks in real life. People ask whether we reconciled. No, we shifted into something colder and more honest. My father sent a birthday card in September with no message, just his name. My mother sent an email before Thanksgiving saying, "You are always welcome if you can be kind." I read it once, archived it, and ate turkey sandwiches in my own duplex with my tenant downstairs and the sound of my radiator tapping like old silverware. I finished the downstairs unit by October. Julie renewed for another year in March of 2025. The rent covered the mortgage, insurance, and enough margin that I was finally able to build savings without feeling guilty every time I bought salmon instead of tuna. The backyard has a small herb bed now. The lower living room gets good sun in the afternoon. Sometimes when I pass the window where my mother staged that blue sippy cup, I still feel that hot, precise anger under my ribs. I think that is reasonable. Because yes, I won. The money came back. The bank corrected the record. The church saw them clearly. A county official, a banker, a contractor, a tenant, and one guilty cousin together made sure my parents could not fold me into one more family story where I was supposedly unstable and they were supposedly concerned. But there's no version of winning that gives you the mother you should have had. The last time I saw Denise Whitaker in person was at Kroger in Newport in February of 2025. Aisle 7, paper towels and laundry detergent. She was wearing a camel coat and looking at fabric softener sheets like the whole world was very demanding. She saw me, set her cart straight, and said, "I hope the house was worth it." I looked at her for a second. Then I said, "It was." And that is true, not because it erased anything, not because I became generous or healed or soft, but because she wanted me dependent enough to be controllable, and instead I became the woman with the folder, the footage, the bank release, the signed lease, and the paid settlement. Some damage stays damage, some doors should stay locked, and some wins are quiet enough that the only sound you remember is the click of the deadbolt after they are finally outside.